Thank you. Okay. Well, I'll start by just giving you just a little bit of background on myself so you understand where I'm coming from and why I do some of the things that I've done and continue to do. Originally, I'm from Chicago, but I grew up in Montgomery County here for a number of years. We did high school here and did college in Washington, D.C. Graduated from Howard University with my degree in music. So today I'm a professional musician. And while music is my profession, studying race relations has been my obsession for a number of years. As a small child, age 10, I had an incident where I was attacked by some racists. And I could not understand how somebody could hate me without ever having spoken to me, never having seen me, and knew absolutely nothing about me, just because of the color of my skin. And I could not accept that. And for the next 50 years, I've been seeking the answer to a question that I formed at age 10, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And I have a vast library that I started when I was a teenager and continue to increase. Books on black supremacy, white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, looking for the answer to that question. But none of my books had the answer. So I decided, well, why not go to the source? You know, who better to ask than someone who would join an organization that has, over 100 years history of hating people who do not look like them and who do not believe as they believe. So I began seeking out leaders and members of the Ku Klux Klan. And they're not hard to find. They're around. So I'm going to skip ahead here. I found out who the Grand Dragon of the Klan was from Maryland. His name was Roger Kelly. And now let me explain how the hierarchy of the Klan works. You have a lot of different Klan groups. There used to be just one Ku Klux Klan. Today there is no such thing as the Ku Klux Klan. There are many Ku Klux Klan groups which have splintered off of the original and then splintered off of themselves. So you have all these autonomous Ku Klux Klan groups. You might have the Dixie Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the Confederate Knights of the on and on and on. These are all separate KKK groups. But they all have basically the same bylaws, the same colors on their robes that designate their rank, the same secret handshake, the same passwords and ranks and all that kind of stuff. They're just autonomous. And very often they don't even like each other because each one thinks, they're the real deal, the other ones, want to be. So, when you peddle in hate, you begin hating each other and yourselves as well. So anyway, the hierarchy works like this. If you have your Klan group in your state and you form a chapter of your Klan group in another state or in multiple states, you may then consider yourself to be a national Klan group. Therefore, you must have a national leader who oversees all the states in which you have a chapter of your group. So now we call our national leader what? The president, okay. In Klan terminology, that individual is known as the imperial wizard. Anybody who is prefixed with the word imperial means that person is on the national level. Wizard is the highest office, like president. An imperial caliph would be like a vice president. So he oversees all the states. Within the state, you have to have a state leader in every state in which you have a chapter. We call the state leader the governor. They call theirs the Grand Dragon. Anybody prefixed with the word grand means that individual is a state officer. A Grand Dragon being a governor, a Grand Caliph would be like a lieutenant governor. And at every level you have secretaries, treasurers, chaplains, on and on. And then within the state you have counties. We would call that person the county executive. They call that individual the Great Titan. Anybody prefixed with the word great means that individual is county level. Within the county you have districts, which they call claverns. And a clavern leader, what we would call a district leader, a mayor, a councilman, an alderman, they call that individual the exalted cyclops. And then below the cyclops is just rank and file, plain white robe Klansmen and women, Klanswomen as well. So I decided I want to reach out to the Grand Dragon of Maryland and sit him down and say right to his face, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? Just tell me. That's all I want to know. And I'm going to write a book on this. I'm going to go up, start here in Maryland where I live, go up north, go down south, go to the Midwest, go to the West, and ask various Klan leaders and members, this question and put it in a book. Because there had been no books written by black authors on the KKK. Mine became the first. And now there had been 2 books written by black authors that dealt with the KKK, but each one detailed how he escaped a lynching, one in the 1930s and the other in the 1940s, but not from the perspective of sitting down face to face with their would-be lynchers, which is what I wanted to do. So I managed to get a phone number and an address for Roger Kelly. And I had my secretary, now I was told, Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly. Roger Kelly will kill you. But I was bound and determined not to get killed, but to fool with him. So, I had to have him, as an interview subject. So I had my secretary give him a call. Now my secretary is white, and I only mention that not because I care, but because it's part of my story. I had his phone number. I could have called him myself, but I wanted her to call him because I did not want him to pick up in my voice that I'm black and say, I'm not talking to you, click, and then my whole project would have ended before it ever got started. But I knew that if she called him, he would know, A, by her voice that she's white, and B, he probably would not think that this white woman is working for a black man. That's just not in that wheelhouse, especially a black man who is writing a book on the Klan, because they didn't exist. So that would increase my chances, perhaps, of him agreeing to the interview. And then obviously, if he agreed to the interview, once he saw me, he'd realize that I'm black, right? So she said, okay, I told her name is Mary. I said, listen, do not tell Mr. Kelly that I'm black. If he asks, don't lie to him, but do not give him reason to ask. And I figured, even if he knew I was black and he agreed to the interview, in the interim, he might be able to prepare different answers that he would have for a black interviewer than he would give to a white interviewer. So I wanted this to be spontaneous and candid. She understood, she called him, he didn't ask what color I was, and he agreed to the interview. So we set it up for this motel room up in Frederick, Maryland at 5:15 on a Sunday. And Mary and I got there several hours early, and I sent her down the hall with some money to get some soda pop out of the machine and put it in a bucket of ice, get it cold, because I wanted to be hospitable. I had no idea what this man was going to do when he saw me. Would he attack me? Would he say, I'm not talking to you, and walk away? Or would he come in my room and sit down and do the interview like he had agreed over the phone with Mary? In any event, I wanted to be hospitable and offer him a cold soda. So had all that set up. Now the way the room just happened to be, if you folks are in the hallway of this motel and the doorway is here, you have to walk through the door, turn to your right, and the room is laid out back here. You cannot see who's in the room standing in the hallway until you come in and turn the corner. So I took the lamp table, took the lamp off, put it over here in the most obscure corner of the room, and put a chair on one side for Mr. Kelly, a chair on this side for me. And we had a couple hours to go. And the reason why I did it so early is because the Klan will send out little scouts, to check places out before they bring one of their leaders. And I didn't want anybody hanging around the lobby and seeing me check in and then word get back to Mr. Kelly that I'm black. So I got there super early. Anyway, we're sitting around waiting. At 5:15, punctual to the second, Mary hops up, runs around the corner. I'm seated at my table back here. And she opens the door. In walks what is known as the Grand Nighthawk. Nighthawk means bodyguard, security. So a Grand Nighthawk would be the bodyguard for the Grand Dragon. An Imperial Nighthawk would be the bodyguard for the Imperial Wizard. So in walks this Grand Nighthawk. He's wearing military camouflage, the Ku Klux Klan insignia, which is called a Myoke or blood drop emblem right here, which is a red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop in the center. Over here are the initials KKK. And embroidered on his beret on his head was a Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And right here he had a semi-automatic handgun in a holster. He comes in, and Mr. Kelly is walking directly behind him in a dark blue suit and tie. Well, the Nighthawk turned the corner and saw me and just froze. Well, Mr. Kelly did not realize that his Nighthawk had stopped short, and he slammed into his back and knocked him forward. So now they're stumbling around, regaining their balance, and they're like looking all around the room, And the bathroom was right there by the door. He was looking in the bathroom, and I'm sitting at my table, watching this, and I could see in their faces what was wrong. Well, I already knew what was wrong, but I could see it in their faces. They're looking for a white guy, and their faces were telling me, they're thinking, did the desk clerk downstairs give us the wrong room number, or did we misunderstand it, or is this an ambush? So I saw the apprehension. So I stood up and I went like this to show I had nothing in my hands. And I walked forward and I said, "Hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Daryl Davis." He shook my hand. The Nighthawk shook my hand. I said, come on in. So far, so good. Have a seat. Mr. Kelly sat down, and the Nighthawk stood at attention to his right. Before I could sit down opposite them, Mr. Kelly says, "Mr. Davis, do you have any form of identification?" I said, "Sure." I gave him my driver's license. He said, "Oh, you live on such and such street in Silver Spring." Well, now that had me a little concerned. Why is he reading my street address? Is he going to come burn a cross at my house or what? All he has to do is look at my name, look at my picture, look at me, match it up, and give me back my license. So I did not want to let him know that he had, slightly unsettled me. But I wanted to let him know, don't be thinking about coming to that address with any, nefarious thoughts in mind. So I said, "Yes, Mr. Kelly, that is where I live, and you live at," and I named his house number and his street. That way, I was leveling the playing field. I was implying, if you come visit me, I might come visit you. So we're going to confine all this visiting to this motel room. So he smiled, he nodded his head, he understood. I did not find out until many, many months later that I had been presumptuous with him, thinking that he might have some ill will going on. What it was this: one of his Klan members, I didn't know at the time, lived right down the road from my house, over here near Aspen Hill. And Mr. Kelly had to drive down my street to get to that guy's house. So it was just pure coincidence he recognized the street name, that's all. But I had no way of knowing that particular day. Today, that same Klan member sits in a federal prison in the state of Maine for committing a hate crime, and he's there for a long time. So anyway, we got on with this interview. I had a bag beside me, a little duffel bag, carry-on bag, and in my bag, I had a cassette player, which I set in the middle of the table to record our interview. I had blank cassettes, and I also had a copy of the King James Bible, because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization, and they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. Now, in my readings of the Bible, I've never seen that in there. So I want to be able to pull out my Bible, say, "Here, Mr. Kelly, please, show me chapter and verse where it says blacks and whites must be separate." So I'm all prepared, right? So we started the interview, and within moments, he was telling me why I was inferior and he was superior. Black people have smaller brains than white people. That's just the way we're born. We're prone to crime. We're lazy. We don't want to work. We try to bilk the government welfare system. I mean, you name the stereotype, I heard it. But it wasn't angering me, because I know who I am, and I know that Mr. Kelly, who's seated right here across here from me, did not know me. So he's not talking about me. I don't have a criminal record. I've never been on welfare. I have a job. So who's he talking about? Certainly not me. And are there black people who fit that? Probably. But for every black person you find, you can also find a white person, somebody else, who's a criminal or on welfare or doesn't want to work. So obviously he's not talking about me, because I know who I am better than he does. And so I'm just letting him roll on. And every time he would say, "Mr. Davis, the Bible says," I'd reach down, pull out my Bible, give it to him so he could find out and show me where it says this. Or if my cassette player ran out of tape, I'd reach down and get a fresh tape. Every time I reached like this, the Nighthawk reached like this, which I understood, because he's doing his job. He has no idea what's in my bag, and it's his job to protect his boss and himself. So I understood that. And a little while later, he realized there was nothing in the bag. He relaxed. I went in and out of the bag. He didn't move. A little over an hour or so into this interview, there was a strange, we were in the midst of conversation, and there was a strange, very short noise, kind of, and we all jumped, and I flew up out of my seat. I knew that Roger Kelly had made this noise. I did not know what the noise was. I could not discern it. And because I could not discern what it was, I became fearful. I perceived it to be an ominous, threatening noise because of the circumstances. Here I'm a black guy, I'm in the room with the head of the Ku Klux Klan, and which is not typical. And with this other person that told me, Daryl, don't fool with Roger Kelly, he will kill you. So I got that rolling around in my head. And now this man has made some bizarre noise that I can't figure out. So I literally feared for my life. And when you fear for your life, you will do one of four things. You go into survival mode. And some people, when they go into survival mode, some of them will just pass out and faint because the fear is so strong, it overwhelms their brain and they just pass out. I don't do that. Some people will tense up and start shaking. Their muscles constrict, and you can be punching them or hitting them with a stick or whatever. They will not even be deflecting the blows. They'll just be like this. That is called paralysis by fear. They're so scared their muscles just contract and they can't move. I don't do that either. The third thing people will do is to run away. That is your best option if it's available to you. To as quickly as you can, separate yourself from your source of fear. Put as much distance between yourself and the fear. That is what I would have done had that option been available to me. But there's no outrunning a bullet in a motel room. So the last option is to do what's called a preemptive strike. You get them before they get you. And when I came up out of my chair, I was ready to dive across that table. I was going to grab the Nighthawk, grab Mr. Kelly, and slam them both down to the ground and take away the Nighthawk's gun. I was not armed, my secretary's not armed, and the only person that I knew for sure who was armed was the Nighthawk, because you could see his weapon on his hip. I did not know whether or not Mr. Kelly had a gun up under his suit jacket or not, but by the mere fact that he was in the Klan and he was there, I was taking him down too, rather than take a chance. So I was ready to pounce across the table. And when I came up out of my chair to pounce, I'm looking right into Mr. Kelly's eyes. I'm right in them. And we're like, maybe that close apart when I leaned forward. And my eyes were speaking to him loud and clear. I didn't say a word. My eyes were shouting so loud he could hear my eyes. My eyes were saying to him, what did you just do? And Mr. Kelly did not say a word to me either, but his eyes were fixated on mine, and I could read his eyes. His eyes were saying to me, what did you just do? And the Nighthawk had his hand on his gun, looking back and forth between both of us like, what did either one of y'all just do? Well, Mary was sitting on top of the dresser to my left because there were no more chairs. She realized what had happened. The ice in the ice bucket had begun melting and the cans of soda shifted down the ice. And that's what made the noise. And it made it again as she was explaining it. All of us burst out laughing at how ignorant we all had been. Now, I won't say that this was a learning moment, but it was definitely a teaching moment. And the lesson taught is this: all because some foreign, underscore, circle, highlight the word foreign, entity, that being the bucket of ice and cans of soda, of which we were ignorant, unaware of, because it entered into our little comfort zone via the noise that it made, we became fearful and accusatory of each other. The lesson taught is this: ignorance breeds fear. If you do not keep that fear in check, it will escalate to hatred, because we hate those things that frighten us. If you do not keep that hatred in check, that hatred in turn will escalate to destruction. We want to destroy those things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless and we were just ignorant. So we saw the whole chain almost unravel to completion. Completion would have been that last component of destruction, had the Nighthawk drawn his gun and shot somebody, namely me or my secretary doing his job, or had I pounced across the table and hurt one or both of them trying to protect myself and my secretary. So fortunately it stopped short of that. However, everybody in here, you saw that whole chain unravel to completion last August 12th, 2 hours from here in Charlottesville, Virginia, where there was a lot of ignorance, a lot of fear, a lot of hatred, and what did it culminate in? Destruction, when a white supremacist got inside his car and tried to murder as many people as he could by ramming it through a crowd of protesters. He injured 20 and ended up murdering one lady named Heather Heyer. So ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. So we carried on with this conversation. There were no more incidents, and we got along fine. At the end, I thanked Mr. Kelly for his time, and he wished me luck, and he told me to keep in touch. And I'm thinking, what? I didn't come here to make friends, but I came here to find out how can you hate me when you don't know me. And I told him I would let him know when the book was ready for publication. Well, on my way home, because I had other Klan people to interview around the country, on my way home, I said to Mary, I said, I rather like Roger Kelly. Well, her head almost hit the ceiling of my car. And she goes, what? He doesn't like you. Why do you like him? I said, well, I don't like what he stands for, but I like him as a person. In fact, we have more in common than we do in contrast. Most of what we have in contrast centers around how we each feel about race. He feels that he is superior and I'm inferior. I feel that I'm equal. He feels we have to be apart. I feel we can be together. But other than that, there are plenty of things, that we could agree upon, except for the size of my brain. And so, in any event, I said I would keep in contact with him. I began inviting him to my gigs, especially when I played up in his area. And he would come. He'd bring his Nighthawk. He'd watch me play, get out and dance. And, and I would invite him down to my house. He would come down to my house. He would bring his Nighthawk. The Nighthawk would sit on my couch next to him, and I would sit across the coffee table, talking and things. Sometimes the Nighthawk would get bored, right? Pull out his gun, he'd twirl it on his finger like this, while Mr. Kelly and I were talking. And I would invite over some of my Jewish friends, my other white friends, some of my black friends, just to engage with Mr. Kelly, so he wouldn't think, oh, well, Daryl's an exception. No, I'm not an exception. I want you to talk to other people, get to know some of them too. So, this went on, for a couple of years. He would even eat lunch at my dining room table or dinner, or we'd go out and get something to eat. Now understand, I'm inferior. He's in my inferior house, sitting on my inferior couch, eating at my inferior dining room table and eating my inferior food, okay? This went on for a couple of years. He did not, but at the end of a couple of years, he was coming to my house by himself. No Nighthawk. He trusted me that much. He never invited me to his house during that time, okay? But after a couple of years, he got promoted from Grand Dragon to National Leader, Imperial Wizard. He began inviting me to his house. I'd go to his house, I would see his Klan den where he would have his meetings. I'd take some pictures, take some notes, all for my manuscript for the book. And then he began inviting me to Klan rallies. I'd go to some of these Klan rallies, and there'd be Klansmen and Klanswomen in their robes and hoods. They make a big, wide circle around this wooden cross. And the cross had been wrapped in burlap. The burlap had been soaked in what they call Klan cologne, which is actually diesel fuel, kerosene. And they have these torches. And they parade around this cross, clockwise. And one of the leaders, the dragon or the wizard, will say, "Klansmen, halt." And they'll all stop. And then he'll say, "For my God." And they all repeat, "For my God. For my race, for my race, for my country, for my country, for my Klan, white power, white power." Klansmen approach the cross. So the Klansmen and Klanswomen will close in to the foot of the cross. Klansmen light the cross. They drop their torches at the base, and then whoosh, this cross is aflame. And they stare at it and admire it for a while, and then they give some speeches, and then the rally is over. So I've been to a number of these around the country, not just Roger Kelly's, but a number of them. And CNN got wind of this. They knew who I was through music, and they knew who Roger Kelly was through the Klan. I thought, this would be an interesting story. So they wanted to do a story on it. I said, okay, fine. They said, when are you going to go to another Klan rally? I said, I'll call you. Well, the opportunity came. Roger Kelly had invited me to a Klan rally on a Saturday. And so I called CNN and said, okay, I'm going to this rally. They said, okay, we want to go. Are you and your band performing anywhere the night before, Friday night? I said, yes. So they came to my gig. I was playing in Vienna, Virginia. And they wanted to film the band to show what I normally do. And so they filmed. And then the next morning, they came to my house. And they followed me 2 hours up the road to this Klan rally. And they said, do you think Mr. Kelly will even talk to us? I said, I'll do better than that. When the rally is over, I will get Roger Kelly, the Imperial Wizard, to come back to my house, and you can interview the head of the Klan inside a black man's house. They said, oh, okay. So they filmed the rally, and when the rally was over, I spoke with Roger and told him what was up, and he agreed. He came back. He drove 2 hours out of his way down to my house in Silver Spring without his Nighthawk, by himself, and he sat in my basement and interviewed with CNN. And this clip was shown on CNN and HLN headline news all over the world, every hour for 24 hours. I want to show it to you now, but I want you to pay particular attention to what Roger Kelly says. He says, even though he and I would do different things together, it did not change his views on the Klan, because his views on the Klan had been cemented in his mind for years. Then he goes on to say how he believes in separation of the races, because he finds that to be in the best interests of all races. But also listen to what he says about respect. Very interesting, another teaching moment. And then the commentary that the two CNN news desk anchors have to make about it. Okay, thank you.
Daryl Davis plays a hot piano. It's part of the show, and it makes him stand out. He also stands out here. Davis is one of the few African Americans you will ever find attending a KKK rally. More than attending, he is welcome.
I got more respect for that black man than I do you white nigger.
It's been a tough day for the Klan. Their Maryland rally found many local residents rejecting the message of white separatism. After it's over, Daryl Davis hangs around backstage with his friend, Klan wizard Roger Kelly. It's not unusual for blacks and whites to be friends, but it is unusual to find a black man as a Klan leader chatting pleasantly over an orange soda after a Klan rally. The relationship started over a book Davis was writing. The secretary set up an interview with Roger Kelly, but didn't tell him Davis was black. They talked and talked some more. Davis learning about the Klan, Kelly learning about Davis.
We get to know one another, we do different things, It hasn't changed my views about the Klan, because my views on the Klan's been pretty much cemented in my mind for years.
Kelly and his Klan friends go to hear Davis and his band. And Davis goes to their rallies.
I sat on the front row and listened to each man speak. Some things I agree with, some things I do not agree with.
Davis thinks that his presence promotes badly needed understanding.
Takes them, I believe, from fear. The fear of the unknown. And I think this is all across the board, regardless of whether it's the Klan or anything else.
But he has no illusions about the Klan. If he did, his friend would be quick to disabuse him.
I believe in separation of the races. I believe that's in the best interest of all races.
Does he really? Or has friendship transcended the color barrier? Listen to Kelly at a Klan rally.
I'm a Colorado man and hellbacker. I believe in what he stands for, and he believes what I stand for. Sometimes we don't agree with everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to it. I respect him to sit down and listen to him.
The strange relationship of a KKK wizard and his black buddy. Washington, I'm Carl Rochelle, CNN Sunday morning.
Good Washington, strange.
Okay, so that's the clip. Now, you heard Mr. Kelly say that even though he and I would do different things together, it did not change his views on the Klan, because his views on the Klan had been what? Cemented in his mind for many years. And he went on to say how he believes in separation of the races, because he finds that to be in the best interest of all races. But he said something very interesting towards the end. He said he respected me. Did y'all hear him say that? The imperial wizard of the KKK respected me. He said, we may not agree on everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me, and I respect him to sit down and listen to him. Folks, that is very important. If you don't take anything else home with you today, take that home with you. If you have an adversary, somebody with an opposing point of view, give that person a platform. Allow them to air their point of view to you. And you sit there and you listen to them. You may not agree with it. It may be derogatory. It may be harmful, okay? But listen to them. And if you agree with them, fine, no problem. If you don't agree with them, that's fine too, still no problem. You challenge them, but you don't do it violently and you don't do it rudely. You say, look, I need more clarification as to why you think I should go along with that program. Give me more explanation. And when you do things like that, there is an excellent chance that they will reciprocate and allow you to present your platform. You make sure you've done your homework so that you can present your platform in an intelligent and influential manner. Because at the end of the day, you each have to think about what the other person said and evaluate it. If somebody says something to you that goes against what you have believed from day one to however old you are today, you think, she does have a point there. You might begin leaning in that direction possibly. So even after my book came out, Mr. Kelly and I would continue getting together, going out and having dinner and things like that. Sometimes we talk about the Klan. Sometimes we wouldn't even mention the Klan. Might even talk about the latest James Bond movie that we both had seen and compare notes or whatever. But we continued with this. And over time, that cement that was in his mind that held his ideas together began to get cracks in it. He began struggling with some of the things that I was saying that went counter to what he believed. But he was finding out that I was right. And so he had to make up his mind, do I continue believing a lie, or do I turn around and believe the truth? This was a struggle. And then over more time, those cracks began to crumble the cement, and it all fell apart. And then Roger Kelly quit the Ku Klux Klan because he no longer believed in what he said in that videotape, okay? And when Roger Kelly quit the Klan, he gave me his robe and hood. This is the robe of the imperial wizard, the same one that you saw him wearing in the video. And that's the Myoko blood drop emblem that all Klan groups use. And of course, this is what's called the hood. It's also called a helmet. Both names are synonymous. This is the hood or helmet, and this is the mask. Members who want anonymity, they don't want you to know who they are, they wear this mask and they peep at you through these eyelets. If they don't care that their identity is exposed, the mask has 3 snaps or Velcro. Just detach the mask and the face is exposed under the hood. And you saw both types in that video clip. Now, I have a ton of these things from different Klan members across the country. I got a few about 2 weeks ago down in Florida. A Grand Dragon down there decided to quit, and he reached out to me. I flew down there and met with him and talked with him, and I got all his Nazi stuff and all his Klan stuff. But it comes through conversation. And what we spend too much time in this country doing is we talk about each other, we talk at each other, we talk past each other. What I prefer to do is sit down and talk with each other. It does absolutely no good to form these anti-racist committees or anti-abortion committees or anti-war committees or anti-whatever committees unless you're going to invite the opposite side to come over and sit at your table, okay, and allow them to present. Because if we all agree on the same thing and we have our meetings, second Wednesday of every month, and all we do is talk about how bad racism is, what am I doing? It's called preaching to the choir. You all already know that. So it's just an echo chamber. So if somebody knows, oh, I know where this Klansman lives, 5 blocks over, let's invite him over. Well, we can't say, no, we don't want him here. Because otherwise, when you do that, you perpetuate the situation. You need him over here to explain to you why he feels that way, where he's coming from, how he got there. No, he's not right, okay? But you need to know where his station in life is so you can better address it. And that's how these things happen. The 2 CNN anchor people implied that I was strange. That's okay. If being strange causes people to get rid of stuff like this, we all need to be strange. It bothers me a great deal that we as Americans call ourselves the greatest nation in the face of this earth. Don't get me wrong, I love my country, I'm patriotic. However, I do have a problem with that statement. Perhaps we are the greatest technologically. We, Americans, put a man on the moon. We invented that technology, okay? And while Neil Armstrong was up there walking around talking about one small step for a man and 1 giant leap for mankind, we were able to talk with him live from Earth all the way to the moon via satellite radio phone. We, Americans, invented that technology. Everybody in here has a cell phone. Everybody in here has email. Hit a few words, hit a few numbers, hit send, and you're talking to people right next door in DC or New York, California, Australia, Africa, China, Asia, wherever you want to talk, okay? We invented that technology. How is it that we as Americans can talk to people as far away as the moon or anywhere on this planet, but yet some of us have difficulty talking to the person who lives right next door because of his or her color, his or her ethnicity, persuasion, whatever? It seems to me that before we can call ourselves the greatest, our ideology needs to catch up to our technology. And when we get them both up there, then we can truly brag about how great we are. Folks, we are living in the 21st century. This does not belong in the 21st century, or in any century, in my opinion, okay? We are living in space age times. So why are there still many of us thinking with Stone Age minds? The answer is conversation. This stuff was learned through dialogue, through conversation. Black people are bad, whites are bad, Jews are bad, Muslims are bad, homosexuals are bad. People are inundated with that conversation, whether it comes from their parents, whether it comes from their schools, their friends, their environment. It's conversation that teaches this. So if people can learn this bigotry on either side, any side, through conversation, guess what? They can unlearn it through conversation. It may take a little bit of patience, but it can be done. Now, I'm not so naive as to think that everybody I talk to is going to change. No, they're not. There will be those who will go to their graves being hateful, racist, and violent. And I know some of those too. But if somebody is willing to sit down and talk, regardless of how far gone they are